Hi everyone. So I came here today with 0 notes because I thought that the brief that we were given today didn't really fit in with what I had to say. So Making Herstory, for those of you who don't know, was founded in 2011 as an informal book club, and it was founded as a result of the murder of my aunt, who after 5 years of trying to make sure that judges and social services and children's services understood the danger of the man that she was trying to divorce, refused to listen to her, allowed him access, and he murdered her as a result. Now, I had been working for women's organisations pretty much since the age of 14. I was a self-declared feminist at the age of 7 at the dinner table one day when my mum had loads of guests. And from the age of 14, I went on all the marches. I went and did whatever I could at university later on. I studied women's feminisms and women's rights at university. It was my thing of life, you know, it was the thing that gave me life. So to have a woman in my world and in my family taken from me after she had fought for 5 years to try and save that life and the life of her 2 daughters was absolutely cataclysmic. It completely upended everything that I believed about the justice system, and not just that, but also about how media treats women. My aunt's case was number 11 on a local newspaper. Nobody will know her name unless I shout and scream about it, and I do through Making Herstory. But Making Herstory came about as a book club. I thought, I just want to do something. I know I work for these organisations, they're all fantastic, but I need to do something else, I will go crazy. So I set up a book club in the hopes that my friends and friends of friends would come together, discuss feminist texts and women's place in the world, and I'll be able to raise a few pounds and send that off to a women's shelter, which is the first place my aunt came into my life. Now, when you build something, it's really, really phenomenal what starts to happen. That little book club became also a film club, because I thought, you know what, let's go watch some films about the books that we're reading and how women are depicted in films. And then those women's shelters that I was approaching to donate money to came back and said, well, we love the money, but could you also perhaps get us some pajamas and some toothbrushes, because we don't have any money or any funds available to give women coming with a plastic bag for nothing aside from the bed that she's going to be given. So I said, yeah, but what do you mean you don't have toothbrushes and soaps and pajamas? And that led to a spiral of, oh, really, our government does not ring fence a single pound for women's refuges. Oh, okay, that's interesting, but 62 billion pounds for potholes. Okay, so that's a new learning. And things started to spiral, and after a while I began to be asked by schools and local councils to come in and talk about my aunt's case and the failings that I learned about as a result of her domestic homicide review reports. Now, all of that came to kind of head just a few years ago, actually, when I did my first Women's Place UK speech. And I remember a very specific moment, about half a year later after that speech, where there was barely any attention, suddenly things started to blow up. I began to get hate mail, I began to get all kinds of awful messages. And I started to realise, wait a minute, what crime am I speaking about? So in the Women's Place talk that I did a couple of years ago, you could barely hear me because of the banging and the screaming and the shouting, ironically telling us to be quiet and telling us that we didn't have a right to a voice. And that speech and the repercussions of that speech led to a world of happenings that have led me here today. And it's the reason why I want to come back to this particular talk, because it's about winning. Now, I'm going to give you 3 examples that I want to really emulate and really talk about. So this morning, I was in Parliament, and I was with Jess Phillips' team. Now, every year, Jess Phillips gets up, and she does the incredibly brave thing of naming every single woman killed by a man over the past year. It takes a full 10 minutes to get through them. I do not know how that woman does that every year, but she does, and she does it with incredible honour and dignity. But those chambers were empty. No Prime Minister, no leader of a party was there to honour these women's names. There were barely any men. There were 2 men in that whole place. And I was there with the Killed Women Network, which works with bereaved families, women and men and grandfathers and grandparents and uncles and aunts who have lost women to male violence. We stood up. Nobody else did. But the fact that Jess Phillips was there shouting out these names to an empty chamber just about kind of perfectly epitomizes how we as women often feel when we're shouting about our rights and what we are trying to make happen for ourselves and our daughters and everyone that we love. Now, when I left that whole event and I was on my way here to meet a friend as well, I was thinking about the fact that Jess Phillips got up to say those names. The fact that she got up to say those names only is only a thing that's possible because of one woman, and that's Karen Ingala Smith. 10 years ago, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, when she began to realize that actually there wasn't anyone calling out women's names, women who've been killed by men, that there wasn't anyone logging this data. The fact that she alone, single-handedly, began to forge this database, a database the police hadn't even thought about creating because we were not that important, right? The fact that she had managed to do this and bring it into Parliament and does it every single year, no matter what it costs her, no matter what it costs her teams to do this, to uncover those stories, is a win. The fact that Jess Phillips gets up every year and says those names is a win. It doesn't feel like a win because those women should be here with us right now, but it's still a win because without Karen Ingala Smith, that would not be happening, and the silence around domestic violence and femicide in particular would be even larger than it is right now. Now, Lucy very kindly mentioned that I write children's books, and there's a lot of turbulence and bullying going on across the sphere, across every single sphere. And as a children's writer, my goal, my only goal, is to ensure that I can write a story that a child somewhere might be able to relate to. Now, the star outside my window features two children who walk into a foster home, and they're walking into a foster home because the mum has been killed. And who's the killer? Well, that's up to the little girl to try and find out. Now, that book and the kind of reaction to it has been really interesting compared to my other stories. There's been a silence, a tiptoeing around it, because we don't really want to talk about this issue with children, even though 1 in 7 children in every single classroom is likely to be going home to a domestic violent perpetrator. We don't want to talk about femicide, even though our local papers are filled with the faces and stories of women who've been taken from our communities. And who do they leave behind? Everyone else that's in school. But we don't want to talk about that, so let's be really quiet. Now, going in to festivals, going to school talks, going to all kinds of events where there are hundreds of children waiting to hear about your stories is wonderful. But over the past 2 years, ever since WPUK's, the last speech I did, that has also kind of become a fearful thing for me. I had death threats saying that if you go to this festival, we're going to be there, you better duck if you hear a pop. So all of these things were happening, and my mind was really all over the place. Do I go? But these are children. What are they going to do? All of these horrible things that mess with your mind, especially if you're a woman, especially when you're getting threats. Now, I went to these festivals regardless. I didn't care about the threats because I thought, you know what? How much of a genius and brave soul are you to be sending me death threats about children's festivals? So I went regardless. And I have to say that this is the second thing I want to talk to you about. Is the incredible courage of mothers is something that blows my mind every single day. Now, right now, we are facing an education system that is kind of blowing up when it comes to especially sex education. There's lots of things about to happen that's about to be revealed. But at one of the festivals in St. Albans, and I remember this so clearly, I remember going to that festival with a threat hanging over my head and trying to get to the signings as quickly as possible so I could get back home. And suddenly, on my table, popped a ribbon, a suffragette ribbon, plaited, wound up like a wristband. And I looked up and I thought, what's happening? Because I'm here to talk about, magical things, and there's a suffragette band appearing in front of me. And this woman whispered to me, keep going. We see and we hear and we're behind you. And I thought, oh my God. If there's any reason why I should not give an absolute about anything negative being said, she is going to be my reason. And wherever I go, I get whispers of, keep going, we're really here, we see this, we can't speak for ourselves, but we can't say what we want to say, but you can say it. And I'm sure that many of you face that, especially those of you having really difficult discussions around dinner tables and losing friends, but also piquing others, making sure that this conversation does not get lost. Now, when it comes to feeling like winners, I can say that not every day makes me feel like a winner. Just to give you an example, so Making Herstory, as I said, it's very grassroots, we're very small. We're kind of like in this weird space. We're not frontline, but we're the people who will send people to the frontliners. So what I often get is friends of friends or people that might have heard of us through the grapevine phoning up to see if they can get help somehow, where to go to. So we're the advisory before anyone can, before they go and get the help they need. We also work with women's refuges to try and get counselling and therapy rooms funded. We'll do suitcase drives, whatever's needed we'll try and do. But about a month ago, I mustered up the courage to go into my website, which is always out of date because I just don't have time to update that thing. But I thought, you know what, I've got to get on it, I've got to get on it. And when I opened up the back end of the website, I received a massive banner, a massive report saying, please, there's an urgent email, please have a look about hacking attempts into your website. Now, we are tiny. We are so tiny. Making Herstory is very small in so many ways. But there had been 42,500 attempts to hack and delete my website. And that was in between July 2022 and this week. So even though I'm so small and so tiny, and even though the figure that I saw kind of gave me a minor heart attack, I just thought, yes, that's 42,000 people who know what I'm trying to do. Well done. That's a win. So the website is still up. That's a win. Now, today we also heard the fact that Maya Forstater and Helen Joyce's petition to ensure that the Equality Act sex rule is clear and sound has reached the 100,000 mark. That's a win. That's a huge win. They're going to have to talk about it, guys. Right, so that's an amazing win. The fact that we are all here right now with a leader who is no longer in power because of her attempts to gaslight women, Nicola Sturgeon, of course, so devastatingly disappointing, but there you go, this is what you get. That's also a win. That didn't have to happen, but it did because of women's force. The fact that this week alone, I think it was 2 days ago, Hershey Chocolate Company pulled their latest chocolate because of women saying they're no longer buying the chocolate, that's a win. We have wins everywhere. And it's so important that we don't lose ourselves in the madness of being told that we don't deserve respect, that we don't deserve to have a voice. Respect is a two-way road. You want respect, you also have to give me respect. And we all have different needs. As women, we have different needs. People from different cultures all have different needs. And until we can actually speak about it and scream about it, we're not going to get anywhere. But we are getting places. So for every single time that you or anyone you know who is in this fight to ensure that single-sex spaces, that women as a sex are not deleted and are not conveniently sidelined and are not conveniently completely wiped out, every time you feel like, okay, so we've still got a police force that most survivors don't want to go to anymore because of what's happening there. The number of names that Jess had to read out today has not shrunk, not even by one iota. And over the years and years that Karen has had to dig out those newspaper stories, we're still in the same place. Yes, we've still got all those fights to fight, but we have girls now protesting in schools over their rights to toilets of their own and not having to get a red card when they get their period to go to school, to go to a school toilet with. We have so many young people now getting up and speaking out, and they are with us in this journey. We just have to find them and make sure that we don't lose sight of what we're trying to do. And none of us are, not anyone in this room anyway. Now, my one thing that I want to leave you with, and I promised Lucy it'd be really short. Is it short? No. Okay. My one thing that I want to leave you with is that there is this belief that women, when it comes to women uniting, that actually we're not as strong a force as we would like to believe. There's a constant backlash. Anything that we say, there's a constant backlash. And if you're someone who is out there trying to speak and you're having 25 voices tell you no, sit down and be quiet, I count it as a win, because the truth is your voice is reaching those 25 people who are trying to shut you up. For every person that's trying to shut you up, I can promise you there's about 120 more who are saying, yes, thank you. So don't lose sight. Don't lose sight. Don't let the anger get to you. Don't let anything that is negative shroud the fact of the positives that are being gained. And they are absolutely everywhere. And hey, that is a win. The fact that we're here is a win. The fact that WPUK has partnered up with Chester Walls is a win. All of it is a win. We have to celebrate every moment and every single person involved in that win. So thank you so much for listening to my waffling. Thank you.